All right, hold on. Okay, can everybody still hear me now? When I'm back on my computer? Okay. So our centering words this morning come from 1 Corinthians chapter 13. If I speak in the tongues of men and angels, but I have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but I have not love, I am nothing. If I give away all I have, and if I deliver my body to be burned, but have not love, I gain nothing. Love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful. It is not arrogant or rude. Love does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrong, but rejoices in the right. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. As far as prophecies, they will pass. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will pass away. For our knowledge is imperfect and our prophecy is imperfect. But when the perfect comes, the imperfect will pass away. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I gave up childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall understand fully, even as I have been fully understood. This morning, as we get centered and move into this moment of gratitude where we normally do our offertory, and we will do our offertory this morning, I invite us to, just as we're listening to this beautiful meditative music that I believe is Janet that is playing for us today, I came across a term that I'll be talking about a little bit more in the sermon called Tonglen. And Tonglen is, in a brief form, the exchange of energy. And as I'm talking about transformational love today, I want us, as we move into this moment of gratitude and enter into the offertory music, for us to take just a few deep breaths and enter into this meditation that is not mine. It was done by somebody named David G. And it's just breathing in and breathing out and reflecting on what we're breathing in and breathing out. And we'll do this meditation and then we'll just move into our moment of gratitude and receive the day's offering. So as we take some time together, I invite us to just begin to breathe in and out. And as we breathe, I invite us to breathe in stillness and release turbulence. I invite us to breathe in lightness and release heaviness. I invite us to breathe in soothing and breathe out releasing pain. Breathing in surrender, breathing out resistance, breathing in acceptance, breathing out judgment, breathing in forgiveness, breathing out grievance, breathing in tolerance, breathing out anger. Breathing in expansion, breathing out constriction. Breathing in clarity, breathing out confusion. Breathing in peace, releasing conflict. Breathing in wholeness, breathing out separation. Breathing in love, breathing out fear. Breathing in love, releasing love back out. Witness love as it flows in and out of us with each breath we take. As we continue this meditative breathing, with hearts of gratitude, we will now receive today's offering. This congregation is a community of ourselves. Its energy and resources are our energy and resources. Its wealth is what we share. As we contribute to its life, we affirm our lives within it.
From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live.
So I don't always have everything figured out, but I do spend a lot of time thinking and contemplating and trying to make connections. And I feel like any good faith tradition, while holding on to eternal spiritual principles, should also be relevant for the day-to-day lives that we're living. Otherwise, why do we come together every Sunday? And so today I want to share with you a concept that is still sort of crystallizing in my consciousness, but I'm bringing it together and attempting to make connections with what might appear to be some discordant areas, but I think it does ultimately all come together. And so if it's not today the most cohesive sermon in the world, at least hopefully I will give you some new concepts to reflect on today. And when I think of the man Jesus, the human being Jesus, I think of love. I think of a human being who embodied the larger spiritual principle of divine love. When I think of Buddha, I think of a human being who embodied the spiritual principle of divine compassion. These were two human beings who came into a world that was filled with fear and anger and hate and violence. And through their lives lived, they expressed and they shared with the people around them and humanity as a whole. They shared and expressed joy and love and kindness and compassion. And so what I've been reflecting on today is, how did they do this? And when I think about that, the term that came to me was the term transformational love. And so that's what I titled my sermon today. As human beings, I believe, even though love is a very large concept that can be broken down, but in general, the guiding light or the glue that holds us together is love. And many times when we think of love, we limit ourselves to thinking about a romantic type of love with another human being, with a partner. But there are so many types of love to sustain us and endure that go well beyond just that human to human love. We have the love we feel for our children or for our parents. We have the love expressed through friendship. We have the universal love expressed through the acknowledgement that we are all part of the interconnected web of all existence. And as Paul wrote in Corinthians this morning, he reminds us that love expands. It does not limit. And so as I understand transformational love, I understand it as the love that faces ignorance, that faces fear, that faces hate, And instead of meeting that energy back with ignorance, fear, or hate, we incorporate it and allow it to be transformed into something else. I said in a sermon a few years ago, you can't defy hate with hate. You don't end violence with more violence. You don't fight ignorance with more ignorance. There is such a thing as righteous anger, and Jesus expressed anger, and he was willing to take a stand. But then he always did something else. He always took that one extra step, and he transformed that ignorance and that hate and that anger with love. He took it in as his own and sent it back out as something else. What we just practiced in our meditation a few minutes ago, like I said, is something called Tonglen. And the way that Tonglen is described by Patrul Ricochet and Pima Chodron is a little bit different than what David G did. The way that we did it in our meditation is we took in what we wanted and released what was no longer serving us. But the way that they do Tonglen in the Buddha practice is that they take in that which is needing to be transmuted and then send it back out. And so so it's about breathing in and then receiving and then moving it back out. And Pima Chodron, an American Tibetan Buddhist nun, says that you can start the in-pull and the instruction as follows. On the in-breath, you breathe in whatever particular area, group of people, country, or even a particular person that is struggling. Maybe it's breathing in the physical discomfort and mental anguish of chemotherapy, of all the people who are undergoing chemotherapy. Or maybe it's the pain of those who have lost loved ones suddenly or recently. But with the in-breath, you find some place on the planet or in your personal life or something you know about, and you breathe in with the wish that those human beings or those mistreated animals or whoever it is, that they are free of suffering. And then you send out, just relax out, send enough space so that people's hearts and minds feel big enough to live with their discomfort, their fear, their anger, or their despair, or their physical mental anguish. That you can breathe out for those who have no food or drink. She says you can breathe out food and drink for them. You can breathe out for those who are homeless. You can breathe out and send them shelter. So in the in-breath, you breathe in with the wish you take away the suffering, and breathe out with the wish to send comfort, peace, happiness, and love. She says you can do this for an individual or for large areas. And it is about breathing in as fully as you can and radiating out as widely as you can. And so this principle that of Tonglen, a man named Chogyam Trungpa writes in his book, Training the Mind and Cultivating Kindness. He says the principle of taking in the suffering or disharmony on the in-breath and spreading an antidote of joy, harmony, or peace of mind on the out-breath is the same as described above. It's a good option to use a small pause after the in-breath to convert the suffering or disharmony to the positive antidote, which is to be breathed out. And then he says, Taking on suffering does not mean to burden oneself with the misery of the world, but rather to acknowledge its existence and accept it. And this makes it possible to increase one's own peace of mind at the same time as taking suffering or disharmony in. So there is less contradiction than there might seem to be. So I got that information from Wikipedia, but I just want us to sit with it for a few minutes as we think about what is really being said, that we have more power than we realize, and our breath has more power than we give it credit for, that we can take things in, and we have the power through our breath to transmute it and send it back out. And I told a story a few years ago of one of the most beautiful images I have of that. And this is an image that probably doesn't work for a lot of UUs, but I want you to think about this. This was a priest that was part of my chaplaincy class about 7 or 8 years ago. And he was a priest in Delta. And we were meeting once a week for our chaplaincy class. And every week he would come and something would happen in his community that he was being called to care for and hold space for. The first week he came, and a young man who was only 22 had overdosed on drugs and had died, with a beloved member of their congregation. And then the next week, another young man in their congregation had committed suicide and shot himself, and his brother had found him. And it just went on like this for a few weeks. And every time he would come to the class, he was still calm, and he was peaceful, and he was grounded, and he was centered. And finally I asked him, I said, how are you doing this? How are you holding all of this pain for your congregation? And he said, because he's Catholic, in Catholic churches, they have the crucifix. He said, every day, at the end of the day, I go and I kneel in front of the crucifix, and I send all of that pain and all of that anger and sadness and fear, and I just send it right up to the cross, and I release it. And that, even though I'm not Catholic, and the vision of a crucifix doesn't make a lot of meaning for me, the image of this priest with this connection with the cross and with Jesus, and his understanding that he was taking in the pain of his congregation, and there was a lot of it, but he didn't hold on to it. It didn't stay inside of him, because if it had stayed inside of him, it would have devastated him. He understood that it is this flow that you take it in, but then you send it back out, and he gave it in his theology to a higher power that could handle the pain. As he said, it wasn't mine to keep. I'm a conduit, but I'm giving it to, in his words, Christ, who can take it and transmute it and do what needs to be done. And this wasn't, I think why I was so moved was because this wasn't theory for him. This wasn't just theology for him. This was a priest living his intimate connection with a higher power and understanding who he was, and that he was a conduit, that he had a place to send it. And that's what I think Tonglen is, in the Buddhist practice, and what we as humanists and Unitarians and people coming from all different faith traditions, there's a universal principle here that just means we can't hold it inside of us. We have to release it. We have to let it go. And that, I think, is what healing is also. And there is a lighter example I'll give of this. On a YouTube, there was a YouTube video that came across my Facebook feed a few years ago. And it was a potential road rage situation where I think some young girls must have cut off an older woman, and then they came to the stoplight. And they were recording probably because young adults, or at least my 14-year-old records everything. But anyways, this woman drove up right next to them and they were waiting to get yelled at. And she drove up next to them and she rolls down her window and then she goes. And the girls started laughing and then she started laughing and she said, you know, I was really feeling anger and then I realized you're just two young, beautiful women, and why am I angry? And why not just have fun? And so she stuck her tongue out and did her little wobbly ear thing. But it transmuted the situation. What could have become a back and forth with anger and yelling became a time for women of different generations, strangers, to look at each other and laugh. And as the light turned green, this old lady, you could see her driving off laughing, and you could still hear the laughing of the girls in the car as they were driving away. And that's all it is, whether you are a priest holding on to deep grief and pain and sending it off to your crucifix, or you're just an older woman kind of stressed out with life and deciding, I'm not going to be angry about this. I'm going to spread a little bit of laughter and joy and make a joke out of something that really wasn't that big of a deal. But do you see how it's the same principle? It's doing the exact same thing. It's taking something in, transmuting it, and then sharing something different with the rest of the world. And so I think we can just think about that. This, I believe, also can work with us when we think about our own bodies or if we are needing to heal. I was given a book to read this week, and it was called Of Monkeys and Dragons, and it was by a lady named Michelle Long O'Donnell, who founded the Holistic Healthcare Center in San Antonio about over 40 years ago, one of the first holistic practitioners. And she, in her book, writes that she starts in the introduction, she says, the law of physics tells us we cannot put something into a space that is already filled. She says we cannot put nutrients into cells already filled with toxic waste. We must first remove the toxins, the garbage, then we can fill the cells with the good they need in order to live, function, and replenish. So too, can we not put a new thought into a mind already full of whatever it is clinging to? First, she says, we must be willing to set aside what we have previously believed in order to hear clearly what is being said. And so I've gone this morning from a crucifix to holistic healing. And on one external level, you would think those don't have much connection with each other. And yet, I believe it's the same spiritual principle. It's the same spiritual principle that we've been talking about for a long time, that health and wholeness are outposts of love and compassion And our physical bodies take it in, our physical bodies breathe it out. Our emotions take it in, we take it in through thoughts. And when we look at the deeper spiritual principle, it all comes together. It all comes together with this force called love. And so I believe that we have the power to change our lives with our breath, with our thoughts, with the understanding of energy and frequency. The words may differ, the practices may differ a little bit, but the underlying principle, I believe, remains the same. And so I want to just close today with this quote from Coretta Scott King. Love is such a powerful force. It is there for everyone to embrace, that kind of unconditional love for all of humankind. That is the kind of love that impels people to go into the community and try to change conditions for others, to take the risks for what they believe in. I believe that that is transformational love. And so I now invite us, if you are here in the congregation, to sing with us, Standing on the Side of Love, hymn 1014 if you're here, and the words will be on the screen for us too.
Faith, hope, and love abide.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of penance. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Go your way in peace, wander as you may. Blessed is the path you take, may God guide you on your way.